Hey everybody, welcome back to Video Game Esoteric, our continuing series on the MiSTer FPGA DE10 Nano project, and we are talking about Nintendo 64 again because Robert or FPGAZumSpass has updated the core, bringing us more visual improvements and more importantly, more playable games that you can enjoy today. Before I get too far involved though, do me a huge favor, go down below, hit like and subscribe, and ring that notification bell, definitely helps us out. And if you feel so kind of want to support the channel, we got a Patreon link down below as well. But right off the top, Bust a Move, or as I more like to call it, Puzzle Bobble, I much prefer the Japanese name, is now working on the core of both games. Last time I showed you this game, it looked like an Atari 8-bit 2600 game, and that is because of an 8-bit rendering mode that was not yet implemented that this game and its sequel use. It's so much fun to get another game working on the current core, and you may notice that this one still does have a little bit of graphical glitching. Some of those bubbles are going to flicker in and out of existence. But this game went from quote-unquote playable with some of the strangest graphics on the core to now looking basically like it should. Outside of the little bit of flickering and a little bit of freezing, this is another game that's been promoted to the working list. And I know Robert is currently working on getting Jeopardy playable as well, so for all of you that have been waiting for the best game on the Nintendo 64, Jeopardy is coming soon. All jokes aside, if you've never played Puzzle Bobble or Bust a Move, it is such a fun game. I absolutely love this series. I own pretty much every game on console or arcade board, and even though they're all derivative of themselves, this is the type of thing that you sit down and play for 10 minutes and suddenly 2 hours goes by. It is a hyper addicting arcade puzzle game, and on Nintendo 64 it was a really great release as well. And it's great to have another game working on the core because right now we're hovering around like 82 to 83% playable as far as all of the Nintendo 64 library is concerned, and having the two Bust a Move games come alive increases that percentage. Obviously we're still waiting on TLB, maybe next week, maybe next month, maybe next year, nobody knows, but getting more playable experiences is always a good thing for a work in progress core. It just gives you more to play and experience and more bugs to find so that they can be fixed. I will say though that this game does have a tendency to freeze every once in a while. Thanks to Andy D for doing this capture. I played a little Puzzle Bobble last night and I had the same experience. Sometimes when you win a match, the game will freeze up like right here. It's not consistent, it doesn't always happen, but if you do see that, it is normal for the current core. Now to a game that has definitely improved is GT64. I can't say this is my favorite racing game on the console. I know some people absolutely love it. I'm a little bit ambivalent, and that's just because it airs more on the sim racing side versus the arcade racing side. And if you know anything about me or my channel, you know arcade racing games are my one true love outside of light gun games. But this game used to run around 5 frames per second, which definitely would not be considered playable. It would go into that bootable category. And you'll see here on the intro, it does run at a decent speed, but remember, not everything on the Nintendo 64 actually ran at 60 frames a second. There's definitely some games that hovered in the high teens or low 20s. We're getting about 15 frames per second for this game right now, which is off the mark for actual Nintendo 64 hardware, but short of that it does seem to be drawing all of the graphics and everything else correctly. So there is still work to be done on the core, obviously no one is disputing that, and speed improvements will come, but this is another game that's definitely been promoted to playable because it does have enough of a frame rate that you can enjoy the experience. Like I said, this isn't exactly my cup of tea because the more simmy aspect of the driving doesn't really do it for me, and this game does take a lot of practice to get used to. But tell me down below in the comments, did you play this game back in the day? Do you own it now? And what do you think about it? Because I know there is a huge contingent out there of people that do love these sort of sim racing games, the Gran Turismos of the world, and you do think they're some of the best stuff of all time. But as far as the graphics are concerned, you can see everything's drawing correctly as far as I remember it. We don't have any major graphical glitches or bugs going on here. It just isn't running quite as fast as it should on original hardware, but that's not really to be expected right now because the core still is 100% in progress. But that's why I love doing these testing videos, because next time we get a core update that increases the frame rate to GT64, I can show it to you guys on the channel side by side with the old capture, and we can have some empirical evidence of how the core is shaping up. But like I said, this isn't one of my favorite games, so don't expect to see it a ton. But if you do want me to test other games in the future, leave me a comment down below. I try to sneak in at least a few viewer requests in each video. Love knowing what you guys love to see, so do leave that comment down below. But from one racing game to another, a lot of you asked to see more footage of F-Zero, including having all the VI filter modes turned on. So go ahead and have a touch of F-Zero, listen to the amazing soundtrack, and I'll come back and show you more games that just work on the current core. But enjoy because it is awesome. F-Zero's just always had a great soundtrack, and I'm not surprised that you guys wanted to see this with all the different VI implementations turned on, because it does really sell the overall look of F-Zero. But the fun thing is we can go back and forth and turn these all off again, and I'm not surprised that you want to see it running off, because some games actually do, I think, look slightly better without all of the different visual implementations we can have on the Nintendo 64. Some games, when you have all of these options turned off, become a big pixely mess. Other games like F-Zero here, because they move so quickly, the pixels don't really emphasize themselves that much. You're going to see a couple of them on the wall here, but because the camera is moving so quickly through the game world, it actually makes it look a little bit clearer versus having those filters on. If we go through the exact same area with those filters back on, you can see that wall becomes much smoother. Honestly, this is totally subjective. You can pick whatever looks good to you, but F-Zero is a great test to talk about the different features that have been implemented in the core, because for the most part, the entire VI pipeline is here. All of those different features are going to be there. You'll see when we turn it back off, the pixels on the ground are quite big, but the minute we actually get up to speed, it really doesn't look like it's that much of a pixelated mess. But tell me down below which one you prefer. Do you like those pixels on or pixels off? Because as we pause here in this tunnel and turn that texture filtering back on, you can see all of those pixels go away. But it's so amazing that we still do get these options, and F-Zero is a great game to test for yourself. See which ones you like turned on and turned off, because the thing about a fast-moving game like F-Zero is that it's going to hide a lot of quote-unquote sins in the texture work, the low resolution of them. Because the camera moves so fast, you barely have a chance to look at anything. Now moving on to another game that's seen vast improvements since the last time we talked about it, that's going to be Resident Evil 2. There is a little bit of graphical corruption on the FMV cutscene in the beginning, but otherwise this looks, plays, feels, and sounds like the Resident Evil 2 you remember if you play the Nintendo 64 version. Last time we took a look at this game, it had a tendency to freeze in random spots, but now that is not happening, and I have read reports that this game is completable. So if you want to have a run at Resident Evil 2 and complete it, tell me down below you did it so I know that that is true. But honestly, this is another fun experience to have a Nintendo 64. Clearly we have the PlayStation 1 version and many other ways to play the original Resident Evil 2, but this is just a game that has improved a ton since the last time we looked at it, because some games just had a tendency to freeze and some games still do, but you can get much further into Resident Evil 2 than you could before, and that is always a good time. And I do like how they managed to get this game over to the Nintendo 64. With the cartridge size, the maximum limit being 64 megabytes, it was definitely an exercise in compression for the developers to actually even make this work. So from a technical standpoint alone, it's a very impressive Nintendo 64 game, and from a MiSTer FPGA standpoint, it is definitely a game that has improved. And as Leon gets to the Raccoon Police Department here, go ahead and listen to the music for just a moment. It is more heavily compressed in the PlayStation 1 version, but it definitely sounds good. I'll be right back with more games. For the compression on the card as far as audio is concerned, it does sound really good actually on the current core. It sounds exactly like you would expect it to on original hardware, and pretty much the experience outside of the FMV having a little bit of garbage at the bottom of the screen is that this game is running exactly as it should if you were using real hardware. And if for some strange reason you have never played Resident Evil 2 before, and I can't imagine anyone on my channel actually not having played it, you definitely have to check this one out, whether it's on Nintendo 64, PlayStation 1, however you do it, play the original. It's a 10 out of 10 Hall of Fame good game, and you're missing out if you haven't. Now moving back over to Mega Man 64 for just a moment, a game I showed recently. It's not because it received improvements, it's because Insane Friend over on the MiSTer FPGA Discords has completed the game, posted captures, and proved to us all that Mega Man 64 is a game that you can beat from start to finish. And honestly, Insane Friend has been knocking out Nintendo 64 games like it is his job. He is by far the #1 person to complete games and tell us all that they work. And I do depend on this community information because, trust me, I do not have the time to try to actually beat every single Nintendo 64 game possible to tell you whether or not they are completable. But you'll see here in the final areas of Mega Man 64, it runs great. You can get to the final boss. Everything is just as you would expect. So if you want to play Mega Man 64 or Mega Man Legends as it's more commonly known, you can 100% play it on the current core. You can get through the entire story, you can save your game, and you can see the credits end. And that's how good this core truly is getting. For a lot of games, you can just basically play them from start to finish. Sure, they might be a graphical occasional glitch here and there, but something like Mega Man 64, you can have the same experience as you would on real hardware because you can play the game, you can enjoy the game, and you can finish the game. This gets added to a long list. Super Mario 64, Banjo Tooie, so many games that you know, love, and remember from this hardware are now 100% completable, like if you're actually playing on real hardware. This list will definitely grow as the core gets more mature, but right now today, if you want to play Mega Man 64, you can see the game to its conclusion. That is awesome, and you even get this ridiculous Mega Man emotionless face right here. Now moving over to Beetle Adventure Racing, a request that I get basically every single video, people wanted to see if this game has improved, and I do see some improvements in spots on certain courses, but this is still a game that has some visual glitching and bugs in certain levels, and we'll get to those in just a moment. But again, like every time I mention this game, if for some reason you've never played it before, definitely check it out. It's one of the best racing games on the MiSTer. Now depending on what course you're on, you're going to see different things occur. The skybox here is definitely duplicating itself multiple times. You get sort of a garbage in the clouds, and you will see that the skybox texture keeps repeating itself almost like a checkerboard pattern. Some of the trees on the side of the levels as well will start to do some really weird things like you see here. The polygons and the textures just aren't appearing correctly. When I saw the skybox, it actually really interested me because I saw a similar issue in another game we recently talked about, and that's going to be Vigilante 69, as you're seeing right here. It has the same or very similar skybox repetition pattern in the sky, so it seems like there must be something in the implementation of the Nintendo 64 hardware that needs to be worked on or added in so that the skybox appears correctly in these games. But short of that, outside of the graphical corruption in some spots, this game feels like it should. The frame rate is good, the motion is smooth, everything as far as the handling and steering are concerned are the Beetle Adventure Racing you know, love, and remember. And like I said, this is one of those sleeper games from the Nintendo 64. I never really hear many people mention this, but it seems like there's a lot of love out there for it because it is a game that continually shows up in the retest requests. If you move on to another course, then suddenly all of that graphical issue basically subsides and the trees look normal. But just remember, on the Nintendo 64 or any other hardware as far as gaming is concerned, just because you see a glitch on one level doesn't mean you'll see it on the next one, and that's down to whatever feature or implementation the developers were using when they were actually developing for the hardware. Just because hardware can do something doesn't mean it's always included in every single game, and just because hardware can do something doesn't mean that developers used it for every single course. But the music quality definitely improved, sounds perfect to my ears. Go ahead and listen, and I'll be right back. Sounds good to my ears, but moving over to another racing game, definitely a racing heavy video, this is Lego Racer. And you guys keep asking me to test this game, and you're going to have to explain to me in the comments down below why there's so much love for it. You know I'm not the type of channel that talks crap on games. This is a competent racer, but it really feels like Mario Kart 64 without a lot of the fun and joy. Maybe I've just never played this correctly, maybe I've just never understood it, maybe it's because I don't own a ton of Lego stuff that I don't get it, but this has always been one of those games that I knew existed on the Nintendo 64, but if you didn't ask for a test on this core, I would never look at it whatsoever. But I can tell you right now, it's definitely playing on the core. The graphics look good, the handling is there, everything seems to be in place. It's just been one of those games that I've never really clicked with. If I'm going to play a kart racing game on the Nintendo 64, it's definitely going to be Mario Kart 64 or Diddy Kong Racing. But I do love how customizable this game is. You can pretty much make anything you want as far as your character is concerned in Legos, and that's always a fun time and why people play with Legos in the first part. And if you do have a lot of nostalgia for this game, you're going to be very happy to see it running here. And I do remember playing this game maybe 5-6 years ago, but my memory of it is not great. This seems to be exactly like it should be on the Nintendo 64, but if you're a huge fan, leave me a comment down below and tell me how you think it runs, because I do depend on your eyes to see things. And Andy D did do this capture for me, and he basically tried to create the crazy Texan from The Simpsons in the Lego game, but honestly, once you see the final design, I think he more created the CEO of Pepsi Company if they drilled for oil, not cola. All jokes aside, I love the customizable aspect of this game, and if you want to play Lego Racer, you can 100% do it in the current core. There is no freezing, there's no hitching, it just feels like a game as it should, and that's always the fun part about doing these user tests. Again, I would never look at this game if you guys didn't ask me, so if you have more tests you want to see in future videos, just leave me that comment down below, because the Nintendo 64 library, in all honesty, is not that deep. Compared to the PlayStation 1 or the Sega Saturn, where I do testing videos on that hardware, we only have have a couple hundred games versus the over 2,000 you're going to see on something like the Saturn. So I depend on you guys to let me know about more stuff to play. But that's the current situation for the MiSTer FPGA core as of the recording of this video. It's 9:52 a.m. on Friday, and you're going to be watching it at 4 p.m. So anything that happened in the last 6 hours that we'll talk about in a future video. And if you want to say anything else about Nintendo 64 and MiSTer, let me know down below. I'm working on an analog video, and I know you guys have been asking for that a lot. It just takes a little longer to shoot because shooting a CRT is quite complex. But I did get that request, and I am going to make it for you guys soon. Short of that, have a great weekend. Hope you play some fun games, and I will see you guys next time. Bye-bye.